up again. However, there's a danger in this, because the oil price drop, it's taking place in the context of a bigger crisis. You'll notice a lot of Walmart stores across the United States and around the world are closing. President Obama likes to talk about how cheap gasoline is. But if you go to any gas station in the Midwestern or southern parts of the United States, if you wait there all day and watch, you'll see a mother with children pull up. She'll very carefully put $2 worth of gasoline into her car. You can't do much with $2 worth of gasoline. There's an economic crisis in the United States, and it's a global crisis. It's not just the price of oil that's down. The price of steel is down. The price of copper is down. The price of gold is down. The price of all the commodities are down. What's causing this? Well, this is a result of the computer revolution. The process of production has become so efficient that there isn't room for millions of people on the global assembly line any longer. People are fleeing Africa for Europe. People are fleeing Bangladesh. People are fleeing the Philippines. People are fleeing Central America. The global economy has become so efficient that they don't have room to employ millions of people. In the United States, after the Second World War, the working people, at least the white ones, and the wealthy and the rich and powerful, we had kind of an agreement. The agreement was that they got to go around the world, they got to carry out their coups, they get to murder people in Korea and Vietnam, they commit these horrendous crimes, and we do nothing about it, and we wave the flag like patriots, and in exchange we get a house, and a car, and a TV set, and the American dream. But the Soviet Union is gone. They don't need the American dream any longer. This agreement has been terminated. At this point, production is so efficient. Let me give you an example. At one time, there were these places called bookbinderies. Hundreds, thousands of people would be employed. They would spend the whole days just binding books. Well, now they have a machine where a single book can be published, can be printed, by simply uploading a computer file and pushing a button. As my friend, the brilliant economist, as he explained, the capitalism of the United States, it has moved into a mode that they can call accumulation through destruction. Why is it that the U.S. is the center of the world economy? It's because Western Europe and so much of the world was destroyed in the Second World War. And with the rest of the world reduced to rubble, the big bankers and billionaires of the U.S. could get rich selling things to the rest of the world. We have militarism in the United States, a kind of vulgar Keynesianism. In order to keep the economy going, you have to constantly be spending on the military. These bankers, they've even turned the prison system in the United States into a way to make profit. The reason that we have the largest prison population in the entire world is because a number of our prisons are not owned by the government. We have private prisons. A corporation gets paid for every person that's locked up. They have an incentive to keep crime going. This is insane capitalism. One of the biggest myths we hear the defenders of neoliberalism and markets, they put forward this idea that markets are the only way to have innovation and creativity. If you think that the free market and capitalism promotes innovation, tell me, why does Hollywood make the same movie over and over and over again? Yes, capitalists take risks, but they'd prefer not to. They want to have a secure investment. They want to maximize profit. When were the first computers created? There's many different debates about this. A lot of people trace computers back to the Second World War. This wasn't an innovation of the market. This was when Franklin Roosevelt went to the corporations and said that if we're going to win this war, you're not going to be free to do whatever is profitable. You're going to do what's in the interest of the country and in the interest of the people. And that's how the fascists were defeated, and that's how we got computers. One thing that they often say, and I must talk about this, when we talk about the global economic crisis, the Western media has one answer. They think they can explain it with one word. If you ask them why there are economic problems in the world, they say China. That's all they have to say. They don't really explain it. But let's get into what's behind this Chinese slowdown. Back in the 1920s and 30s, China was the sick man of Asia. A very large percentage of the people were drug addicts. British had actually forced China to import narcotics when they tried to stop the importation. A lot of major parks in China had signs, and the signs actually said no dogs or Chinese allowed. Can you imagine how humiliating that was for a people with such a vibrant history as the Chinese? You see, history's been rewritten by the Western imperialists. We're taught in the United States that Asia, Africa, and Latin America have always been poor. This is a lie. When my ancestors in Ireland and France were living in caves, people on this continent had vibrant civilization. The Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayas. The Middle East was the cradle of civilization, with Hammurabi and Mesopotamia and Persepolis. The African continent had Timbuktu. They built the pyramids. The Western colonizers are not civilizing people. They're not developing people. When the British Empire went to India, they didn't put the people of India to work in the textile mills. They burned the textile mills of India, and they forced the people of India to buy their cloth from Britain. Look at Mexico today. Once there was a vibrant agricultural industry in Mexico. Since the intervention of Western corporations, millions of Mexican farmers have been tossed out their land, and now they're forced to import food from the United States. For centuries prior to 1949, the West had been investing in China. They'd been doing business there, but the people were poorer than they ever had been. But 1949 changed everything. A new government came into power. Prior to 1949, China had no steel production whatsoever. With Soviet assistance, they launched their steel industry in the 1950s. China began to produce its own cotton and its own clothing. They built power plants and hospitals. In 1961, the Soviet Union cut off aid to China. For a brief time, they tried to have the most egalitarian kind of utopian system that they could have. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping said, "To get rich is glorious." Now, many see this statement as somehow an embracement of capitalism, but it was the opposite. He said, "Poverty is anti-communist, but to get rich is glorious." He said that China could not become prosperous by redistributing poverty, that huge efforts had to be made to increase the productive forces. Wall Street started investing in China, but it was tightly controlled. The Chinese Communist Party keeps a firm hand on all the corporations. They only do business for the benefit of the country. There's no other society on earth that has ever executed billionaires. But every Chinese business owner knows that if he gets on the wrong side of the Communist Party, he could be dead. Recently, the owners of the McDonald's meat supplier, it's a U.S.-owned corporation called OSI, they were serving rotten meat to the public. The Communist Party bosses in Shanghai brought them out of their offices in handcuffs. So what is this Chinese slowdown? China has stood up. What started in the mountains with Mao Zedong and the 8th Route Army has drastically changed the world's situation. 50% of the world's steel is produced in China's government-owned steel industry. China makes its own cars, its own cell phones, its own satellites. The Chinese slowdown is simply the fact that China is no longer buying things from the colonizers and the imperialists. Wall Street bankers can't depend on making money from China because the Chinese people don't have to buy it from them anymore. The Chinese people have stood up and they have their own economy. Now, there are problems on the stock market, but the Chinese stock market is very small. Less than 2% of the population is invested in it. But the wages of Chinese industrial workers increased by 14% in 2012. The world tourism industry is having a boom because there's a new wave of Chinese people going on vacation. First time in the history of their families. China has lifted itself up out of poverty. It has taken control of its resources and its economy, and now it's leading the world. If I've learned anything from Bill Doors, the economist who taught me, who got me to think beyond ideology and about economics, is that the imperialists don't want to make people rich. They don't want to lift people up. They don't want to stabilize. They want to tear things down so people are dependent on them. There's a lot of confusion about capitalism and socialism. In the U.S., we have a guy named Bernie Sanders. He's running for president as a socialist. When they asked him what socialism means, he says socialism is a government that works for everyone. By his definition, every candidate would be a socialist. None of the candidates say, I only want the government to work for some people. That's not very good campaign rhetoric. What is capitalism? Well, the best definition that I've found comes from Frederick Engels. He said, under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Houses don't get built so people can live in them. Houses get built so landlords and bankers can make money selling and renting them. Food isn't produced so that people can eat it. Food is produced so that capitalists can make money selling it. This system based on naked self-interest can't be left to its own devices. So what is the alternative? Well, you can call it socialism. You can call it people's power, central planning. You can call it whatever you want. But the alternative is when rational human beings run the economy, not the chaos of the market. Give this alternative whatever name you want. It's defined by governments that are not accountable to Wall Street bankers, but accountable to the people from whom they govern. I'll tell you this, and I don't tell this to you as an American. I tell you this as somebody looking at the world economy, looking at what these oil bankers have done to the world. I've got to humbly urge you, don't give up Petrobras.
Desistam da Petrobras.
Don't let Rockefeller, Carnegie, DuPont, and Rothschild come into Brazil. Preserve the republic and the control of natural resources. The forces of evil behind modern international capitalism, they have no loyalty of any kind. They aren't patriotic, they aren't religious, they don't worship any god but money. They blindly and fanatically worship their own profits. They obediently follow whatever the crazed, irrational, invisible hand of Adam Smith directs them to do. The only alternative to the insane greed that has seized the Western world is popular power. When the people stand arm in arm and fight for their rights, and they take control of the economy, and they force them to function for the good of the public, this is how the world changes. This is how people's lives improve.